Welcome to the P.A.S. Report Weekly Roundup Podcast. The P.A.S. Report provides an honest analysis on the critical issues that matter to you without the biased media filters. Here's your host, Professor Nicholas Giordano.
What's up, everyone? Welcome to the P.A.S. Report Podcast. This is your host, Nick Giordano, and it is done. The former U.S. president has been indicted and officially charged, and I want to take some time to talk about how this profoundly affects Americans, how it affects our country going forward. In today's episode, I'm going to focus on what is currently going on in the United States, because the indictment and arrest of a former president for political purposes, it's a perversion of justice, and it has far-reaching ramifications. I want to make one thing clear. This goes far beyond Trump. Whether you love him or hate him, it's not about you, it's not about me, it's about every single American, regardless of your political beliefs. The Trump indictment is not a legal matter. We need to state that clearly. We now see what he's indicted with. It has implications for our republic and the rule of law, but these idiots don't see that. And now is a moment for us to reflect on what it means to be American. What are the values we hold dear, or at least what we used to hold dear? If a clear crime is committed, then prosecute. I have no problem with that, but that's not what this is about. And you don't have to look far to see that. The Southern District investigated this. The FEC investigated this. Cyrus Vance, the previous New York City DA, investigated this. And all declined to bring charges. Ask yourself why. And spare me the talking points that this is about a crime. This is not about a crime. It's about an individual being targeted for a crime after dozens of other investigations didn't lead to a prosecution. And you cannot target individuals in search of a crime. It's a mockery of the justice system. And to make it an even bigger mockery, you had former Speaker Nancy Pelosi tweet out that Donald Trump's going to have the opportunity to prove his innocence in court. That's not how the system works. Someone should tell her that. See, the way the system is supposed to work is that it's incumbent on the prosecution to prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. But they don't care. They don't care how the system works. They don't care what the consequences are. They don't care about the cost. They don't care about the destruction. And I want to have a brutally honest conversation about what the Trump indictment really means for us as a society. It's not going to be pretty, and I'm not going to sugarcoat it. We need to talk about what's to come, because the future of the nation, it looks bleak right now. And it's not about Trump. There's so many other things going on that we're not going to be paying attention to because we have to watch this circus. No matter how much you despise the former president, it's wrong on so many levels, and it has lasting consequences. Consequences that we may not be able to come back from. Consequences that we will come to regret. Unfortunately, when all is said and done, the only real losers in this whole thing, it's going to be the American people. It's going to be you and I. This is much bigger than most are imagining, and there's a lot at stake. As we face our decline, as America is declining both domestically and abroad, we are slipping into a banana republic. And for all the Democrats that may be tuning in, you're going to want to listen up, because while you may be celebrating today, in time, it's going to be a road you wished you never traveled down. And I'm fired up. I'm going to explain it all. Before I get to it, make sure you subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode. Go to the PAS Report website, pasreport.com, sign up for the newsletter, and share this episode with your family, friends on social media. And it's time we recognize how far astray we are here in the United States. Some see Trump as the Antichrist, others see him as the Messiah. And remember, former President Trump, he's just a man. Too many are ignoring the precarious state America is in, and that our collapse has already begun. Our life is going to change, but let's be distracted. Let's focus on nonsense that actually doesn't mean anything. See, my loyalty isn't to one man or one party. My loyalty is to the United States. And unfortunately, my children are not growing up in the United States that I grew up in, where American values were appreciated, where the idea of America was a noble idea, where we respected our history, we respected our founding, where if you said something, it didn't mean the end of your career. It didn't mean you were going to be isolated and marginalized in society. I grew up in America where we were on top of power, where we were the ones that dominated the international landscape, where the world respected us. They might not have liked us. They might not have liked all the things we did, and there were a lot of boneheaded policies that we implemented, but they at least respected us. And that's all gone. Today, the world is laughing at us. You have third world countries saying, look, they're doing the same thing that we do. Welcome to the party. For those of you celebrating today, think deeply about what you're truly celebrating. Think deeply about that. Consider how nearly every institution at the executive level has been politicized and weaponized. How we are witnessing the weaponization now of the judicial branch, where the criminal justice system is being used to target political opponents. It's not about justice. It's not about prosecuting crimes. This is not only a grave threat to our republic, but a blatant abuse of power. If we don't speak out against it, we're allowing those in power to undermine the very foundations of our system of government. We have to hold these officials accountable. Those in positions of authority. Doesn't matter what the political affiliations are. If you abuse your power, you should not be in that position. And don't you try to dare lecture me that no one is above the law. Don't you dare do that. In fact, I never want to hear those words uttered again, because there are people above the law. If you're part of a protected class, you are very much above the law. Consider that the same week we learned the former president's indictment, we also learned that an internal Department of Justice memo explicitly directed the U.S. Marshals not to arrest protesters at the homes of Justice Kavanaugh, despite Section 1507 of the U.S. Code, which prohibits picketing federal judges. Now, in a February 28 Senate hearing, the Attorney General, Merrick Garland, was explicitly asked why marshals didn't make any arrests, and Garland's response was, quote, "The marshals on scene make that determination," end quote. Clearly, he lied. You don't need a huge investigation about this. While the Attorney General is now claiming, well, he never saw that memo. Are you really telling me that I'm supposed to believe that the Attorney General wouldn't be in constant communications with the marshals as protesters were storming the streets of our Supreme Court justices' homes? Is that what you're saying? And in all those communications, no one told the Attorney General that the marshals protecting the justices were being actively discouraged to make any arrests? Is that what you really want me to believe? So when is the Attorney General going to be charged for committing perjury? Of course he won't, because just like everyone else, he's part of a protected class. See, the protected class, they could say they could do whatever they want, never be held accountable. Don't forget how James Clapper, the former ODNI director, and John Brennan, the former head of the CIA, openly lied to Congress when they were asked whether the government was spying on Americans, whether the government was collecting data on Americans. Don't forget how no one was charged when we found out the CIA was spying on sitting members of the United States Senate Intelligence Committee. Don't forget, FBI Director James Comey and Andrew McCabe were never charged, even though they both leaked classified information to the press. What about Hillary Clinton for the private server? What about the Biden family business? There's a lot of people above the law. And to those who accuse me of playing the whataboutism game, stop playing the whataboutism game. I'm guilty as charged, because that's what it's about. It is about whataboutism. It's the glaring double standard that you're advocating for, where one group of people can get away with just about anything while others are targeted for BS. It's about how the powerful are protected by the system. Those who agree with narratives are protected by the system, while those that disagree with it, other narratives, are crushed by it. Let's face it, paying hush money to a porn star, it may be distasteful. You may not like it. It may not be morally right, but it is not illegal. However, mishandling classified information by using a private server, or lying to Congress, or spying on the American people, those are all serious crimes. And yet we see no consequences for those that committed these crimes. The fact that former President Trump is being targeted with some untested legal theory, while others get away with real crimes, and crimes that have a real impact on our lives, crimes that actually hurt and damage the system. And it's a clear sign that justice in America has become a myth. It's clear that this indictment is nothing more than a political vendetta against a former president. If you can't see that, then you're either being willfully blind, you're blindly partisan, or you're just dumb. It's one of those three things. See, District Attorney Alvin Bragg is relying on an untested, unproven legal theory to bring these charges, which obviously raises concerns about the legitimacy of this indictment. If there was truly a strong case against the former president, Bragg would have pursued it using established legal methods. Instead, he's resorting to manipulating and stretching the law because he's desperately trying to make the charges stick. And this sets a dangerous precedent for our justice system going forward. See, I prefer that our legal system is not used as a tool for political retribution. And I'm talking about on all sides, but unfortunately, the ship has now sailed. And it will be used. Remember, Trump is the most investigated man in American history. You might not like him. Can he be obnoxious? Sure he can. Is he a narcissist? Yes. Does he add fuel to the fire and compound his problems? Absolutely. Sometimes it would be much better if he just kept his mouth shut. I'm not here to defend things that he may say. However, while he can be boastful and nasty and exaggerate things, those that use the system for political power are the far bigger threat. It's time to wake up and recognize that the real threat to our democracy is not one man, but it's a system that is being manipulated for political gain. And there are several aspects to this, and I went through it 2 weeks ago, but just to rehash, first, you have the attempt to provoke Trump supporters. There is no doubt in my mind that there are some nefarious individuals in power that would love to create another January 6th, because if another January 6th happens, it justifies the expansion of the surveillance state. It justifies the expansion of federal powers. The federal law enforcement and intelligence agencies will be able to justify the targeting of political opponents. Secondly, it's no doubt a distraction from the Biden administration failures and the collapse of America, particularly on the global scale, where we are seeing a massive global power shift currently underway. And I'm going to explain that in a few minutes. Thirdly, the media is going to cover Trump 24/7, leaving little oxygen for anything else. They claim to despise this man. They claim he's a stain on America, yet he's what keeps the lights on. Okay, if it wasn't for Trump, how many people would be watching CNN? 10 people? 20 people watching MSNBC? So they're going to go wall-to-wall coverage with President Trump. Fourth, they know the indictment is going to help Trump in the primary. They also know that this is an incredibly weak case, but maybe that's the point. See, they want to get Trump the nomination, and then what happens? What happens once he gets the nomination? And if you don't think this is going to happen, you got another thing coming to you. They want to destroy him. They want to destroy the Republican Party. They're actually open about it. I mean, just look at some of their tweets. You look at some of their tweets, particularly the Never Trump crew out there, and they say that their goal isn't necessarily about Trump. It's to destroy the Republican Party. And so what they're going to try and do is slap him with indictments, maybe in Georgia and maybe at the federal level. Why? Because they want to create chaos. When there's chaos, it's much easier to exploit the system to gain power. And they also know that this is going to help President Biden during the 2024 campaign. I explained it 2 weeks ago. In 2020, Biden was able to hide in his basement. He had the luxury of COVID. This time, he doesn't have that. Can any of you out there picture Biden going coast to coast, stopping in 7 states in a day, giving 6, 7, 8 campaign speeches in a day? Can any of you imagine that? Well, we won't have to imagine that. Because if they try and hit President Trump with more political indictments from Georgia or from the federal investigations that are going on, it's going to allow President Biden to disappear and hide in the White House basement for the 2024 race. You know, maybe this is the reason that President Biden hasn't announced he's running for president yet. Maybe this is the reason, because he's waiting till the other charges drop on Trump. But more importantly, and this is the most important aspect, it's an effort to continue the ideological purge within society. It's the effort to continue and complete the political weaponization of every American institution, where we're filling them with a bunch of ideologues. This is the most dangerous aspect to the whole thing. So we're going to take a quick break. When we get back, I'm going to get to the most important aspect of this whole thing, because as Nero fiddles, Rome is burning. And the same thing is happening here in America right now. America is collapsing, but very few people are paying attention. And they're not paying attention because they're not feeling it directly yet. But they will. So hang tight. I'll be right back to explain it all. Listen up, P.A.S. report audience. Experts say that China is hoarding a massive amount of food. They're soon going to have over 2/3 of the globe's corn reserves, over half its rice reserves, and over half its wheat reserves. But when asked about it, China lies. And one expert says that they, of course, will never admit to doing something like that. Well, what does China know that we don't? When it comes to the global food shortages, China is the canary in the coal mine. And you have to understand, China is the world's #1 food importer. They rely on the rest of the world to keep their people fed, so they can't afford to mess up. There'll be riots, civil panic, or even worse, when over 1 billion people can't eat, it's going to create a crisis for them. What does that mean for us? What does that mean for Americans like me and you? Food shortages. That's why it's a smart idea to stock up on a kit of the best-selling 4 Patriot survival food. Create your own stockpile of the best-selling 4 Patriot survival food kits. It's hand-packed in the United States. The kits are compact, stock easily. They have different delicious breakfasts, lunches, and dinners, and I can attest to that because I use 4 Patriots, and their 5-star reviews on the website rave about the flavor and taste. Right now, you can get 10% off your first purchase of 4 Patriot survival food by typing in the code PAS at checkout. Just go to 4patriots.com, use code PAS to get 10% off your first purchase of 4 Patriot survival food. That's 4patriots.com. Use code PAS. As I said before the break, as Rome burns, Nero fiddles. We are witnessing the collapse of the United States. President Biden, he's eating his ice cream and his administration is dithering. And if you don't think we're witnessing the perfect storm of disasters for the United States, just wait, because you're going to be feeling it soon. The American dream, it's on life support. I talked about this last week, where the idea of generational progress, that the current generation does better than the previous generation, that the future generation will do better than the current generation. We're seeing this idea of generational progress slip away. And a Wall Street Journal poll showed 78% Americans say they don't feel confident that life for our children's generation will be better than it has been for us. I'm certainly in that category because we are facing the perfect storm. The economy is in shambles. You have high inflation, increasing energy prices. Now you have Saudi Arabia and OPEC announcing further cuts. It's only going to drive up prices, particularly as we head into the summer driving season, where gas prices already increase because of the summer additives that have to be added to the fuel. And unfortunately, you have families that are struggling to pay bills. Credit card debts are at all-time highs. Credit card defaults are actually increasing dramatically. We are hearing about more and more layoffs, which are expected to increase. Last week, it was reported that nearly 200 smaller banks are at risk and could go the way of Silicon Valley Bank. Last week, you had the Treasury Department announce that the Social Security Trust Fund is going to be depleted by 2034. And you didn't hear any of this on the news because, everything's got to be about the indictment, the political indictment of Trump. We're seeing an increase in homelessness. It's everywhere. I mean, it's no longer relegated to the cities either. I live on Long Island. I live in suburbia. And it seems that every time I get off the Long Island Expressway or Sunrise Highway, there's a homeless person that's on the side of the road asking for money. Our infrastructure is collapsing. Energy grids pushed to the brink. And consider that from 2011 to 2020, the United States added 52.2 gigawatts of new utility-scale electric generating capacity, whereas China has created 792 gigawatts of new electric generating capacity. China is building a power plant every week. We can't do that. And energy, it's the most important aspect, but it's not just energy. When was the last major refinery that America has built? The 1970s? I mean, think about that logically. Has our population greatly increased or decreased since then? It's greatly increased. It's expanded. The industries have expanded. And yet we're working on the same grids. And yeah, there's been upgrades to power plants, but we're not building major power plants anymore. It's a disaster. And it's not just with energy. Just read the Army Corps of Engineers. Read their report issued. They issue it every couple of years. And they do a cumulative review of our infrastructure. What's our grade? C minus. C minus. And we're supposed to be the sole superpower of the world. Not anymore. We have open borders. The Biden administration directly responsible for the collapse of our southern border. I had former ICE director, current visiting fellow at the Heritage Foundation on Monday's episode, Tom Holman. He explained what a disaster it really is. There is so much that's not being reported out there. And if you haven't listened to that episode, I suggest you do. Tom Holman, it was fascinating. Our officials have abdicated their responsibilities, particularly Secretary Mayorkas, who should have been impeached 2 months ago. It's a disaster. The border is being overrun. Border Patrol agents are being pulled from the line, and they're now serving as processing agents. Completely unacceptable. You have the cartels gaining an enormous amount of power, making billions of dollars in drug and human trafficking. And speaking of drug trafficking, fentanyl deaths have tripled over a 3-year period. Most of the victims, young Americans with no history of substance abuse. They made a mistake. Our children are being murdered, but the officials in charge, they don't care. They don't care. Where's Alvin Bragg going after the drug dealers? Where's Alvin Bragg going after the fentanyl dealers? Where's Alvin Bragg going after the violent crime in the city? Oh, that's right. Most of the charges are downgraded on actual criminals, on violent offenders. And what's particularly frightening is how random it is. This isn't the typical gang violence. Many of the victims are being randomly chosen at random, assaulted, hit with weapons, stabbed, pushed on subway rails, shot. It's insanity. People have lost their damn minds. And you look at the mental health crisis. The mental health crisis that they inflicted due to the authoritarian decrees of the little Mussolini wannabes. While we've seen depression and anxiety increase in all Americans, the mental health crisis is especially worse in younger Americans. They damaged an entire generation. The damage that they inflicted on our youth, that's the real crime. That's the real crime, and we see it every day. as we have witnessed the complete collapse of our education system. Proficiency levels are at 30-year lows, and the academic achievement gap has widened to the widest levels ever. You have massive amounts of learning loss, and we just cycle students through, just cycle them through. Rather than refocus and actually educate students, the ideologues, they want to brainwash. They want to push a political agenda and indoctrinate kids. Hey, the kids can't read, but guess what? They'll know the 64 different genders that exist. God forbid they take accountability. God forbid they admit their culpability. God forbid they develop solutions to begin to fix the crisis that they created. No, we can't have that. We can't have competency. Instead, they want to cover up their failures. How many are aware that 23 public schools in Baltimore have failed to produce a single student proficient in math despite spending a staggering $21,000 per student per year? How many are aware that students in New York State perform twice as poorly as the national average in math and reading? Or what about the 53 Illinois high schools failing to achieve grade level proficiency? Not a single student in 53 high schools can do math at the grade level they're in. And for reading, 30 schools where they can't produce a single student that is reading at the grade level they're in. It's pathetic, and this is happening all over the country. And here's where the cover-up comes in. Because in many places, they're not trying to improve scores. They're not trying to improve proficiency. They are redefining what proficiency means in order to reflect what they're deeming as the new normal. So the new normal is to have dumb kids, dumb students. That's the new normal. They have such low standards. They have no faith in the younger generation. Even worse, we have legislators, unions, bureaucrats, administrators. They're talking about passing legislation to do away with proficiency exams in grades 3 through 8. Imagine that. Rather than help these students, they want to do away with these exams, conceal their failures, continue to cycle students through. Guess what? If there's no exam, well, we're doing a great job in the education system. So our students are failing. They're not learning anything. But yeah, let's keep pushing a divisive curriculum. Let's push diversity, equity, inclusion, and social justice. That's going to get them real far in life. That's going to turn the student body into competent human beings, productive members of society. Let's keep pushing this gender theory. Students might not know about our government and civics. They might not know about their role within the system. They don't know about the 3 branches of government, never read the United States Constitution, have no idea what the Declaration of Independence is, can't name more than 2 or 3 founding fathers. They might not be able to read, write, or do math and think critically, but let's keep pretending, right? Let's keep pretending that it's working. It's ridiculous. And remember, one day these students will be the ones in industry. They will be the ones in business. They will be the ones in law. They will be the ones creating policy. You know, what amazes me, people are like, oh, when did our corporations become so political? When did our corporations start getting involved in social issues? Well, it's when we created a bunch of ideologues in the K through 12 system, pushed them through the higher education system, which made it even worse, and then released them into the workplace, where they didn't learn how to actually do a job. They just learned to be ideological. And it shows. Just look at Bud Light. It's the perfect example, right? So they want to placate and push this idea that they got the transgender spokesperson now. And for what? Who's their target audience? How many transgender people are actually drinking Bud Light? You have the Country Music Awards doing drag performances during the award ceremony. Are you kidding me? Like, do they know their audience? And it's because you have these ideologues that have gotten to these positions and pushed this crap to socially engineer our society. And then you look at our military, right? We're missing our recruitment goals, not by the hundreds, but by the tens of thousands. Our stockpiles are being depleted. Our readiness levels are at the lowest levels they've been since World War II. It's 18% of warrant officers say that we are actually prepared for war today. Our military has been hijacked by the pencil pushers in the Pentagon. Drill sergeants can't even yell at new recruits. Instead, we fill their heads with all this race and gender crap. It's crazy. Imagine you keep pushing this idea that America is a systemically racist country with racist institutions. And then we're wondering why people aren't joining the military? Who would want to join the military and defend that type of system? Who? Now, the biggest red flag when it comes to recruitment is the over 70% of current soldiers and veterans who say they would not recommend the military as a career to their children. Alarm bells should be going off. But our military leaders, they're too busy trying to figure out this white rage. They're too busy talking about white rage than actually prepare soldiers to fight and die for the country. And this is at a time where the global threats are growing. Just think how China announced 2 weeks ago that they're the new global power, that the global power structure has shifted. They are now the dominant power. We are witnessing the beginnings of where we're going from a unipolar world with the United States as the global leader to a bipolar world. Countries are turning away from us. Countries are turning away from the dollar. We are witnessing the dollar lose some of its supremacy. We are witnessing long-standing allies move closer to China's sphere of influence. I'm talking about allies like Brazil, who we've been allied with since, 1880s? And yeah, there's always been ups and downs in relationships. Colombia, our best ally in South America, is moving closer to China. Where is Tony Blinken? What is our diplomatic policies? What is our foreign policy? Saudi Arabia, they move closer to China. They're now actively trying to undermine the energy industry, hurt us here in the United States. India's moving away from the dollar just like Brazil. Japan announced it's going to purchase Russian oil. Remember, all our allies, we're not going to purchase Russian oil. We're not going to purchase Russian oil. Well, Japan's announced they're going to be purchasing Russian oil. I remember when the president of the United States, President Biden, talked about isolating Russia. Open your eyes. Doesn't it feel like we're pretty isolated today in the international community? It's a disaster. So you have all these things going on at the same time. Now, if it was 2 or 3 of them at the same time, that would be a lot. That would be difficult to manage. But having them all happening at the same time is a disaster. It is the perfect storm. But don't worry, the indictment of President Trump, that's going to fix everything. All those other things aren't really that important, even though they have a major impact on our lives, even though they only signify the collapse of our country and potentially Western civilization. But that's okay because you got your revenge. This is how dumb we've become. The Trump indictment is nothing more than a convenient distraction from the real problems at hand. The real problems leading to the collapse of the United States and Western civilization. It's maddening to see politicians ignoring these issues. It's maddening to see them target their political opponents, spy on American citizens, labeled parents as domestic terrorists. It's maddening when you see the president of the United States, the so-called unifier-in-chief, labeled nearly half the country as fascist and the greatest threat to our republic. But I have to say, Mr. President, the greatest threat to our republic are people like you. The greatest threat to our republic are the politicians that weaponize the political system, the bureaucrats that push ideology over policy. The greatest threat to our republic is ignoring the critical issues that I just mentioned. It's not just the takedown of a former president. And it's disheartening to see ideologues prioritize silencing dissent and chasing their own tails instead of addressing the real threats to our society. They claim they care about democracy, they care about freedom, yet they push authoritarian decrees as if they were nothing, as if we didn't have a constitution. So there's so much more at stake, and it's time our leaders step up to the plate. And it's time for the people. Wake the hell up. Look at reality. This is not the America from 30 years ago where we were firing on all cylinders, where we were at the height of our power. That America is gone right now. And we can turn it around. I mean, we don't have to go down this road. We can turn it around. We just have to have the will to do it. We just have to put aside the stupid emotions and feelings that drive every single debate. Because I want to caution you that if we continue down this path, our country will collapse. If this happens, we will witness a significant change in our way of life. And this goes to all those elitist liberals, right? All those elitist far left. I don't want to use the word liberals because I feel like the far left has perverted what liberalism really is. So I'll use far left. All those elitists on the far left, the upper middle class people, understand that when everything collapses, all the comforts and privileges that you enjoy will be lost overnight. Because it's the middle and the upper middle classes that suffer the most. The wealthy elite, they're going to remain unscathed. They have the means to avoid anything bad. The poor, they're survivors. They're always survivors. Every day to them is about surviving. So they are able to adapt and adjust to the changing situations. It's the lower middle, and the upper middle classes that are going to experience a profound transformation of our lives. For those of you out there who are celebrating this, for those of you out there who engage in the virtue signaling, maybe you could take pride in the fact that when everything collapses, you could pat yourselves on the back that you contributed to the perversion of our legal system. You contributed to the weaponization of our institutions. You decided to promote indoctrination and instill this hatred for our own country, all while acknowledging your white privilege. Bravo to you. Great job. Great job. So when it all collapses, look internally at what you have done to lead us towards this banana republic. Now, if you found this episode informative, share it with others on social media. I appreciate all the 5-star ratings and written reviews on any podcast platform that allows it. I want to thank you for joining me, and I'll be back on Monday with another great episode of the P.A.S. Report podcast.
Thank you for listening to the P.A.S. Report Weekly Roundup Podcast.
Have a good one. Bye.
Be sure to rate, share, and subscribe to the podcast so you'll never miss an episode. Also, visit PASreport.com and follow us on Twitter at PAS Report.